We have for you 8 different things that Aspies wish that other people knew about them. And number one is that you need to walk in our shoes before you understand us. And by the way, that's almost impossible. What we're saying is you need to have a point of reference of what we are experiencing so you can associate that experience with our experience. Okay, there you can understand. Now, I've talked about this many times in other videos, so I'm going to make it very brief, but most people with Asperger syndrome, those of us with high functioning autism have a very difficult time socializing with other people, communicating with other people. You put us in a crowd and these other people are intermingling and socializing and we stand over by the wall or try to get out of the way because we find that very uncomfortable. How do you associate with that? How can you walk in the shoes of somebody that has that, people call it a disorder? I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's just different. But okay, so you go to a crowd. Maybe you're at a wedding reception and you go off by yourself. You're being an Aspie, right? No, that's not the same thing. That doesn't make you autistic. That means you're just kind of mimicking the behavior. But you need to feel what people with Asperger syndrome really feel. And this is the example that I like to use, and I've used it many times. You've heard it before probably if you've watched my videos, so apologies if we're going over something old. But if you are a person who is not autistic, chances are you don't like to speak to large crowds. In fact, if you were invited to speak before a large group, you become very inhibited. You become very self-conscious. You become extremely nervous. I've heard people, political candidates, who just fell to pieces before they were called upon to participate in a debate because they couldn't speak before a crowd. These are the exact same people, the people in the crowd. These are the exact same people that they interact with every day. Many of them are their friends. They will walk up to them and have a good conversation, but something about being in front of this crowd doesn't click with them. That is something that is very close, not identical, but very close to what a person with Asperger syndrome experiences when he or she is put in a social group. Number two is we speak a different language, in a sense. For example, I've used this illustration before, but I was once playing miniature golf with another couple good friends, and their grandson was there, and he was very obviously autistic. And his idea of playing miniature golf was to take his golf club and kind of bat the ball around the green. He wasn't trying to get it in the hole, he's trying to have fun. And I hate to say it, but the grandfather had what I call a neurotypical breakdown. You think only Aspies have breakdowns? Nah, not so. Because he became a little bit irritated, a little bit upset because his autistic grandson wasn't doing it right. And when he tried to correct his autistic grandson, then his grandson had a breakdown. He just flew he went into a tantrum. Why is that? Well, it's because we speak different languages. So the idea the definition of fun to Grandpa was hitting the ball in the hole. The translation for the word fun for the little autistic boy, was just batting the ball around the green. So, we can both have fun, right? Me and Grandpa and whoever else was there, we could hit the ball in the hole, and the little autistic boy, if he wants to bat it around the green, let him do it. That's his language, let him go for it. So you need to understand that we speak a different language. What you hear or see from us may not be, and usually or often is not, what we are trying to communicate. You're hearing something entirely different. For example, we may be saying, I feel inhibited, I feel intimidated, I feel nervous, I feel anxiety, I feel stress. And what you hear us saying by our body language is that we are aloof and arrogant and standoffish. Different language. Number three is this, and this kind of associates with what we just said, is that your diagnosis is wrong. Now, the people to whom I am speaking are probably not even listening because they don't want to hear this. But you need to understand that autism is neurological. It's not something that is a part of behavior. We cannot learn not to be autistic. It is part of our brain, our mindset. That's the way we are. But when we behave like people with autism, which we all do, all of us who have autism, we behave that way because we are that way, people will diagnose that as something that it's not. So they'll see our behavior, like we mentioned before. Maybe we will not be part of the conversation. So how do you diagnose that? Well, you don't say, oh, the person's autistic. No, what their diagnosis is, you're a loner. That's the wrong diagnosis. Or they may diagnose you, if you're autistic, as being aloof. That's the wrong diagnosis. The diagnosis is Asperger syndrome. You may say, well, that person is, they're just kind of temperamental, or they're not temperamental. They don't know how to express their emotions, so they need to learn how to express their emotions. Wrong diagnosis. The correct diagnosis is this person has autism, has Asperger syndrome. He is high functioning autistic. He doesn't express his emotions, at a ball game when everyone else stands up and cheers, because that's not the way he is. He doesn't maybe go to a movie and cry when everyone else cries because he or she is focusing on how did they film that shot? Why did they do the lightings that way? Why did the screenwriter write those particular lines? Why is the actor doing it that way? Why didn't he do it this way? Everyone else is sitting around bawling, and to the person with Asperger syndrome or autism, he or she is sitting there looking at these people, say, what the crap is wrong with these people? I mean, it's a movie, for crying out loud. They're actors. Again, we speak a different language, and you're thinking, well, these people. Speaking of people who have Asperger syndrome, these people are weird. Now, that's a misdiagnosis. We are not space aliens. Believe me, we are not space aliens. I've been in an airplane that's as far close to space as I've ever been. We're not space aliens, and if you diagnose us as that, all that means is you don't know how to diagnose people with Asperger syndrome. Now, I got to throw this in because I was diagnosed officially with Asperger syndrome, autism, when I was 65 years old. And I got to tell you, throughout most of my life, I would diagnose myself, but not as an Aspie, not as someone with autism. I would diagnose myself as somebody who was inferior, somebody who was unrealistically shy, somebody who just didn't measure up to everyone else. Again, somebody who just had this horrible inferiority complex. What is wrong with me? I misdiagnosed myself. So don't feel bad about misdiagnosing people with Asperger syndrome. Just acknowledge the fact that if they're behaving like an autistic because they are autistic, then the correct diagnosis is they're behaving like an autistic because they're autistic. That's the correct diagnosis. Number 4 is this. We wish you knew that Aspies are not all the same. Now, when it comes to autism, most people know that there is a linear perspective, which is not totally accurate. So, on the one end of the spectrum, people imagine there is Rain Man, and on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are high-functioning autistics, that is, people who have an IQ of 70 or higher, who don't need a lot of help living their life. Everybody needs some help. It doesn't matter if you're autistic or not, but we don't need a lot of help. I don't need anybody helping me get dressed in the morning, even though with my autoimmune difficulty, it's starting to change, but got nothing to do with autism. But we don't need help brushing our teeth and combing my hair and all that. Probably need help combing my hair because I've always been terrible with hair, but that's beside the point. And that is, by the way, a trait of autism or Asperger syndrome usually. But the point is, it's not quite as linear as we think it is. We talk about the spectrum, but it's a multidimensional spectrum. And the problem with having that linear perspective is we tend to think that all people with autism have all the same traits or trait deficits. So some of us have some of the trait deficits, some of us don't have some of the trait deficits, or some of us have some of the traits and don't have some of the traits. So we're not all the same. You can't line us up in a line from the highest functioning person with autism, which by the way is probably everybody, to the least functioning person with autism. It just doesn't work that way. You probably ought to know that if you're not autistic. And if you are autistic, yeah, you need to know that as well. Number 5, Aspies wish you knew that we don't have a look. Now, the reason I say that is because that's one of the reasons we are misdiagnosed. Another reason is because people don't know what autism is. They don't know what Asperger syndrome is. They don't know what high functioning autism is. Um, I didn't know what it was. I mean, I've heard the words, I came across them now and again, had no idea what they meant, let alone that I was autistic until I, started studying autism and Asperger syndrome, and because someone else said their son was autistic and they probably had Asperger syndrome, just kind of sparked an interest in me. So I began studying Asperger syndrome and autism, and I said, "Man, I see a match there." So I thought about it, studied it some more, and finally went to talk to a therapist after I found somebody who was very qualified in dealing with autism. So, I couldn't fake it one way or the other. I wanted someone who could see through any unintentional counterfeit behavior. And, I checked almost every box, right down the line. But before that, throughout most of my life, I didn't even know it existed. So the point of all that is, one of the reasons we have this misdiagnosis so often is because we don't have a look. I would look in the mirror and I would not say to myself, "Oh, you look like you're autistic." No, there is no look. And you hear that quite often. Well, maybe not quite often, but occasionally would probably be a better way to say it, is people will say, "You look normal." There is no autistic look. I mean, if there is one, there are behavior patterns. For example, people with Asperger syndrome don't like to mess around with their hair a lot. Or if they do, they're not very good at it. They may mess around with it quite a bit trying to get it right, but they never do quite get it right. Quite frankly, I just gave up. I used to work on my hair a lot, and I'd get out the hairspray, use a can of hairspray trying to get it perfect. And one day, a very kind, considerate hairdresser came up to me and said, these are not the exact words, but said, "Your hair is lopsided. This doesn't look right. If you will come to my shop, I'll give you a free haircut. I'll make it," because she said it was lopsided. And I looked in the mirror and said, "Yeah, it is kind of lopsided." But finally, I came across this device called a Flowbee. And typically every Sunday I'll give myself a haircut. I put a part in it, and that's the way I've worn my hair really for probably since I was 11, 12 years old. So that's just the way that it is. But we don't have a look. There is no way that you can look at an Aspie and say that's an Aspie, except maybe they have bad hair. But, a lot of people don't have good hair. They just don't care about their hair, so that doesn't mean they have Asperger syndrome. Or you may notice that somebody who has Asperger syndrome has we do these things where we'll rock back and forth or whatever called stimming. And you'll see people doing that. Some people flap their hands, pop their knuckles. I hate that. Why? Doesn't that hurt? Apparently not. People wouldn't do it. But we have all these things that absorbs the stress, absorbs the tension. And people with severe autism, they do it much more obviously. But we learn to mask. I catch myself stimming, and sometimes I'll stop. More often, now that I'm older, I don't care. I just go ahead and, rock back and forth. People don't like it, don't look at me. It's just that simple. But we don't have a look. We do learn to mask. We do learn to hide it because, you got to function in society to some degree. So another way we mask, at least for me, is I just stay away from people. Psychologists say it's probably not the best thing to do, avoidance, but I do it anyhow. So we learn to mask is number 6. Number 7 is, yeah, we do have empathy. One of the criteria some people say of Asperger syndrome is, or autism, is they don't have empathy. Well, there are 2 different kinds of empathy. Actually, some people say the 3, some people say the 4, but the 2 basic kinds of empathy are affective empathy and cognitive empathy. Affective empathy simply means you have affection for other people. How hard is that? Well, it's not hard at all. It's real simple. You have affection for other people. But what if you don't show that affection? Well, some people misdiagnose that. They say he has no or she has no affection. Yes, we do. We just don't show it. The way that other people show it. Don't like to be hugged, by the way. Well, sometimes it's okay. Pat me on the back if you want. Hug me. Depends on who's doing the hugging. My wife, she can hug me all she wants. If she wants, she usually doesn't bother. But, close family, I'm okay with that. But outside of that, I don't even want to shake your hand. Let's do a fist bump, all right? But, people interpret that as saying this person doesn't have empathy. He's unable to communicate. Yeah, it's there, just expressed differently. What about cognitive empathy? That's the other kind, where you are able to read people's minds by observing their body language, just like you read someone's mind by listening to the words that they say. If you understand their language, you know what they're thinking because, well, they're saying what they're thinking. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, right? So, yeah, we understand these people because we hear their words, or we know what they're thinking because we're watching their behavior, which is where the misdiagnosis comes from. So we are watching their behavior, their body language, and we don't see it. It's called mind blindness. That is a lack of cognitive empathy. So it's true. People with Asperger syndrome, with autism, tend to lack cognitive empathy, but not affective empathy. That is something that people need to know. We wish everyone knew that, but they don't. In fact, it would be nice if everyone knew what autism was. Vast majority of people don't know that it is, let alone what it is. And as I said earlier, I was one of those people for decades. Maybe heard the term now and again, had no idea really what it meant. Number 8 is this: we respond rather than react. So people who have autism tend not to be as highly emotional. Okay, we have meltdowns, right? We talked about that earlier. We have meltdowns. It's kind of like we take all of our emotional reaction and we concentrate it into a short period of time. I'm getting better at that. I'm learning to, hey, I'm having a meltdown, or I'm about to have a meltdown, or I just had a meltdown. Stop it. Knock it off. People are going to think you're crazy. And sometimes they do, out walking around about and you have a meltdown, people call the cops on you because they wonder, is this guy on some narcotic or something, or is he crazy? What's going on? But by the time the cops get there, you're okay. Usually it lasts for me a few seconds and it's gone. But yeah, I've had people turn around and stare at me, wonder what in the world's going on. But yeah, we have meltdowns. So we do have reactions, but typically day to day we have responses rather than reactions. So let's say that you're driving down the road, somebody bumps into your car, so another driver bumps into your car. A person with Asperger syndrome typically will not throw a hissy fit, will not have a temper tantrum. They will get out, look at the cars, maybe take a picture. That's what I would do anyhow. Get the other person's license number, call the cops, do all those things, but you don't get angry. You don't get mad about it. Just, okay, accidents happen. We had an accident. Somebody bumped into somebody else. May have been you, may have been them. We don't go to pieces over it. We don't get mad about things. People may cut in line at the wherever, grocery, whatever. We recognize it. It's a bad thing. You should not do that, but we're not going to go to pieces over it, even though it could make us mad, But other people, they may throw a hissy fit. That's not what we do. Go to a ball game, everyone gets excited, jumps up and down and screams. Why? I mean, does that help? Maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe it helps your team. And I think, yeah, you get the home court advantage because you get the cheers, right? But people with Asperger syndrome are likely to sit there stoically with their hands folded in their laps, stemming back and forth, enjoying the ball game. We're responding. We're not reacting. We're not up and down hollering. And by the way, if you got one of those loud whistles, please knock that off, would you? It drives people crazy. So, sporting events, that may be a problem if you are an athlete and you're an Aspie, because sometimes you need that adrenaline going. You need to get a little bit upset, particularly if the other team is pulling ahead. That helps. That may be a detriment for people with Asperger syndrome. So we tend to respond rather than react, and usually that is a positive trait. Sometimes it's a negative trait because, fight, flight, it's part of the human experience. So sometimes we don't do either. We just, we just sit there and analyze the situation. That's a good trait, sometimes a bad trait, when you need to get out of there. See those two rectangles on the screen? You got something we missed? Let us know in the comment section. But if you want to just keep talking, click one of those two rectangles. The conversation will continue. But if not, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.